Hello everyone, I am Rahul. So we are continuing with the same chapter, climate change and sustainable development. So let's start with the first slide. So now green finance has been in news for quite a long time, but it has not been, the targets have not been achieved of what amount these finances are required for green development. Now, what is green development? Green development is that development which balances our economic development with the environment. So, the term green finance has gained a lot of attention in the past few years with the increased focus on green development. The Rio Plus 20 conference documents clearly states that green economic policy should result in and what it should not result in. So while there is no universal definition of green finance, some definitions have been given by different financial institutions like International Development Finance Club's approach to reporting on green investment, China's green credit guidelines, World Bank's corporation sustainability framework, and UK green investment bank policies. The main theme of these definitions of green finance is the finance which is related to the areas of clean energy, energy efficiency, green buildings, sustainable transport, water and waste management, and etc. etc. So these are green finances. So the basic idea that we understand about green finance is financial investments that flow towards sustainable development projects and initiatives that encourage development of a more sustainable activity. Sustainable development is a development which takes care of our own needs of the present generation without compromising the ability for the future generation to take care of their own needs. That is, we leave enough for the future generation while consuming the resources of earth. Fine. So financial investments in these sustainable development projects are green finances. So green finance includes different elements like greening the banking system, that is how banks provide loan to the projects which involve clean energy and energy efficiency, etc. Then greening the bond market, how bond market can be used to have green climatic projects loans. Then greening the institutional investment, how the investors should invest in the projects which are environmental friendly. So therefore mainstreaming of green finance within financial institutions and financial markets have started happening in the last few decades after the 1992 conference happened in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, Earth Summit. You should remember that. And its result was Kyoto Protocol, which came into effect in 1995. And it is also called, Earth Summit is also called UNCED, UN Conference on Environment and Development. You should remember these can be asked for pre-exams, in pre-exam. Now, voluntary standards should be adopted by the various institutions so that we can have enhanced environmental risk management for many financial institutions. So these voluntary standards are called Equator principles. Now Equator principles is a risk management framework adopted by the financial institutions for determining, assessing and managing the environmental and social risks in a project. Now what are these environmental and social risks? For example, a company sets up a project, fine, but this project can have negative externalities to the environment. What do you mean by negative externalities? That is negative effects. Suppose a chemical factory is established, that chemical is poisonous, but the company is dumping it in the nearby land and rivers while therefore polluting the rivers and land. So this will have they will have financial as well as legal consequences because the company might have to remediate that site that they have polluted Also, legal cases might be slapped on the company because it has violated the environmental standards, and it might give negative publicity also to the company, which leads to boycott also sometimes of its products. Fine. So this is environmental and social risk, which should be accounted for by the lending institutions, because the risk will be passed on to the loan givers only. Fine. So let's move to the next slide. Now, some of the institutions that have taken actions in the field of climate change and sustainability. So first one is World Bank Group has informal sustainable banking network of banking regulators which promote sustainable lending practices that I have already told you. That means those practices that sort out this environmental problem thing that I've just told you, environmental risk na, that risk should be accounted by the banks and other lending institutions, because this can affect their interest earning if the company like goes bankrupt or something like that due to environmental problems, or huge slapping of fine by the courts. Fine. Now 20 stock exchanges have already given guidelines on the environmental disclosure. That is, companies should give their environmental disclosure to the loan givers and investors and stakeholders, so that they can take the decision after knowing all the aspects of their investment, so that they are not kept in dark, that in future they have to see the consequences. Fine. So companies should tell their investors the environmental consequences that the product they are going to make can have. Fine. So green indices and green ETFs are also being developed. If your green indices will tell how much of the projects are working for climate change, stability and sustainability. Fine. Green ETFs are like mutual funds which are involved in green projects or climate friendly projects or environmental friendly projects. Now Financial Stability Board, this is the board which takes the decisions in the behalf of G20. Fine. So it has made a climate related financial disclosures task force, which will be going to release its report in March. It has already released in report in March 2016. Fine. Now Germany, US and UK has provided interest subsidy and guarantee programs for green financing. That is, the projects like renewable energy and water conservation and all. The Germany, US and UK provide interest subsidy and guarantee programs to the companies which execute these projects. Now private green finance and public green finance are also the steps towards the green economy, but private green finance is difficult to come by in the developing countries like India. Fine. Also, more than 12 green investment banks have been opened which are operating globally. One of the bank is UK's Green Investment Bank, which gives loans on commercial scale to the green projects. Okay. So now the G20 has also recently set up a green finance study group, which is studying the green finance in terms of enhancing the ability of financial system to mobilize the private green finance, thereby facilitating the green transformation of the global economy. Okay. Now green development is also important to India, though green finances are yet to pick up. Attaining the ambitious solar energy target, development of solar cities, etc., setting up some kind of smart cities and providing infrastructure which can be considered as a green activity. Then Clean India and Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, these are sanitation programs. So all these programs come under the activities of green finance. Okay. Now National Clean Energy Fund has been set up out of the cess on coal produced or imported this National Clean Energy Fund cess has been imposed on the basis of polluter pays principle. So this help in financing and promoting clean energy projects and researches. Fine. Now these projects, some of these projects have been financed by the fund include innovative schemes like Green Energy Corridor for boosting the transmission sector. Now JNNURM, then Jawaharlal Nehru National Solar Mission, installation of special solar photovoltaic cells and small capacity lights, then using solar photovoltaic technology in the water pumping systems, solar photovoltaic systems in power plants, then grid connected rooftop solar power. So most of the projects in the solar power sector has been funded by this National Clean Energy Fund, right? Now so far 4 banks have issued green bonds in India. Green bonds are the bonds in which the bonds are invested in green projects. Fine. So the proceeds of the bonds are obviously used for funding in renewable energy and the investor gets this interest. SEBI has already approved guidelines for green loans also. Now, while mobilization and effective use of green finance is of primary importance, there are some issues which need to be taken care of. Green finance should not be limited only to the renewable energy. Fine. For a country like India, coal-based power accounts for 60% of the installed capacity of that is total electricity. Out of total electricity, 60% is obtained from the thermal power plants. That is mainly based on the coal. Emphasis should be on greening coal technology, that is supercritical coal technology in which there is very less greenhouse gases emissions. Now green finance is also important because most green technologies is in the developed countries like US, Germany and France and these countries, and that too they have in the private sector, so which is bound under the IPR, intellectual property rights, which makes them very costly, and hence the developing countries are not able to access these technologies. Now green bonds are also new financial instruments, and thus they are very low tenure and might have very higher risk also, because the green bonds might not succeed in providing profit to the companies which are floating these green bonds. Though there is need for an international agreed definition of green financing, as I have already told you that many different institutions have given their own definitions without having the perfect single definitions that can be followed by everyone. So this might lead to problems like over accounting. Those projects which are not even green might be included in the green projects, and the developed countries might say, see, we have invested in the green projects, but they are not invested in the green projects. So while environmental risk assessment is important, banks should not overestimate risk. This means that banks should not be over conservative about the environmental issues also in providing the green finance. Otherwise the projects will get stalled because due to less credit availability in the market. So भैया सारा खेल पैसे का है, पैसा चाहिए सारे काम करने के लिए, right? So also the developed countries are to be blamed mostly because the developed countries are marred by conspicuous consumption. This means widespread consumption, huge consumption and unsustainable lifestyle. Like an average American uses 28 times or 25 times more resources than the average Indian. So this should also included as a parameter in deciding green finance, because those who waste more should also spend more in the green finance. Fine. Now coming to the intended nationally determined contributions. Now INDCs are plans by government communicated to UNFCCC regarding the steps they will take to address climate change domestically. Obviously, that how much we can reduce our greenhouse emissions, how much we can spend in solar energy so that the emissions reduced, what steps we can take so that we can save our environment. All these will be given in a document which is submitted called intended nationally determined contributions. Now Conference of Parties, which is the 19th conference, which has happened in Warsaw, and it reached an agreement that the countries should prepare their INDCs and should submit it in the COP21, that is this recent Paris agreement. So this is according to the Article 2 of UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, which was signed in Earth Summit in 1992. Fine. So what does this Article 2 of UN Framework Convention on Climate Change says? It says that to achieve the stabilization of greenhouse gases concentration in the atmosphere at a level that would prevent dangerous human interference with the climate system, such a level should be achieved within a time frame sufficient to allow ecosystems to adapt naturally to the climate change. That is, ecosystem have capacity to adapt to the climate change. So the changes should be done in such a manner that ecosystem has capacity to revert the change. Fine. And we should also ensure that food production is not threatened and economic development is also moved forward in the sustainable manner, right? So this is Article 2. Now India houses 30% of the global poor, 24% of the global population without having access to electricity. Also 92 million people don't have access to safe drinking water. You can know about the issues like Latur issue, and the government is proposing that in UP most of the villages have been electrified completely, but on ground situation is something different. Somebody says Gorakhpur has been completely electrified, that is to say 24-hour electricity, but the Gorakhpurians also disclaim this 24-hour into 7 electricity move. So these are all the issues which are with these problems of environment. So now the problem is India has so much of the poverty and less electricity and like very low amount of drinking water present in some areas. So India has more responsibility towards this field rather than climate field. That is, we should respect the respective capabilities of different member countries. That is, developing countries especially I am talking about. So given the challenges India faces, it has prepared an ambitious plan in terms of clean energy, energy efficiency and lower emission intensity while addressing the critical issues of poverty and food security. Now India's climate change contributions, what have India made in their INDCs? Now healthy and sustainable way of living based on traditions and values of conservation, very important. Traditions and values of conservation, like previously we have Baulis, step wells to conserve water in the arid areas. Fine. Then we have like wells and all. Then we make artificial lakes where the water gets accumulated. All these things are traditional conservation practices. So this should be followed. Now climate friendly and cleaner path as followed by similar economies should be followed. Now the INDCs of India say that the emissions should be decreased by 33 to 35% of its 2005 levels by 2030. Now what is this emission intensity? That is amount of emissions of greenhouse gases per GDP, that is emissions by greenhouse gases upon GDP value. So this gives us emission intensity, that is how much productive we are and how much we release. Fine. So India has proposed to be more productive, that is for the same GDP it will try to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. That is, it will try to be more efficient, to say it finally. And also 40% of cumulative electric power installed capacity, India has proposed that it will generate through non-fossil fuel based energy resources, that is not from coal and petroleum but from solar energy, wind energy, geothermal energy, etc., etc. So these can be achieved from technology transfer, low cost international finance and green climatic fund. Fine. Now moving forward. Now India has also said that it will prepare an additional carbon sink of 2.5 to 3 billion tons of CO2. Carbon sink is mostly forests. So it will grow forest or grow trees like compensatory afforestation, so that it can enhance its carbon sink and hence decrease the level of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Now India is also proposed to enhance its investment in the developmental programs in sectors which are vulnerable to climate change like agriculture, water resources, Himalayan region, coastal regions, health and disaster management. Most of these issues are present in NAPCC. We have 8 programs in the under NAPCC, that is 8 missions which are based on agriculture, water, Himalayan resources. First 3 are there, the last 3 are not there, I think so. So total 8 missions are there which deal with agriculture, water resources, Himalayan region, then green technology, then one more thing was the sustainable habitat, then research in climate, etc. So these are the 8 missions of NAPCC. Now moving forward. Now India has tried to mobilize domestic and additional funds from developed countries for mitigation as well as adaptation. Mitigation and adaptation I have already told you in the previous video. So India is also trying to build capabilities, create a domestic framework and an international architecture for quick diffusion of cutting edge climatic technology in India. So these should be helped to by the developed countries because they have the technologies as well as the skill set to build capacities. We can create a domestic framework, but international architecture have to be prepared by coming together of all the member countries, whether they are developed or least developed economies. So also we need funds for joint collaborative R&D, so that new technologies can be prepared which can save our environment from climatic change. Now INDC target which are mitigation related. India's INDC have ambitious renewable energy targets. I have already told you mitigation related targets are which prevent or decrease the release of greenhouse gases or prepare sinks so that they can absorb the greenhouse gases. Now first of all, the target are of renewable energies. For example, 60 gigawatt of wind power installed capacity are proposed to be done by 2022. Similarly, 100 gigawatts of solar power installed capacity are proposed to be done by 2022. Now India has also launched the historic International Solar Alliance. These are the countries which are between Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. So they have launched the alliance for harnessing the solar energy. Similarly, INDCs. Now these INDCs have given the told that coal is the dominant source of power generation. I have already told in the future too, because we have approximately 600 years of coal stocks in our country. So we should need to increase the efficiency of power generation through coal, and then by using the clean coal technologies which help in decreasing the emission of CO2 and hence decreasing the carbon footprint. Now in addition to the mitigation related things I have told you just in the previous slide, we have adaptation related targets. First of all, out of the 8 national missions on climate change, 5 focus on adaptation in sectors like agriculture, water and forestry. I have just told you before also. Then INDCs also highlight the rural livelihood security and disaster management. Now financing of INDCs can be through budget, then mixture of market mechanism, both fiscal and regulatory interventions, and finally the international finance, where the international finance and budget are the main mechanisms for mobilization of finance, and market mechanisms have not developed much. Now INDC targets, now see currently wind power is the topmost renewable energy source, and we need to extend it till 60 gigawatt by 2022. This might be possible, but solar power, see, it is only 4 gigawatt and we have target of 100 gigawatt by 2022. So this seems difficult. So let's see what happens by 2022, whether we will be able to achieve this target or not. Fine. Now coming to the international assessment of INDCs. Now IPCC reports, fifth report, have given the assumptions that if we spend this much money, then how much temperature rise will happen. If we spend this much money, how much temperature rise will happen, etc., etc. Then first of all, if business as usual contribute, that is, we don't care at all about the climate change, then global rise in temperature will be by between 4.1 degrees Celsius to 4.8 degrees Celsius, and Earth will become non-inhabitable approximately. So in this case, the greenhouse emissions will be between 60 to 80 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent. So above 60 to till 82 emissions can be there, and temperature rise will be consequently 4.1 to 4.8 degrees Celsius. Here we are not providing any finance for green technologies, etc., and green projects like renewable energy, energy efficiency, etc. But if we restrict the carbon dioxide emission between 52 to 55 gigatons, then the temperature rise will be 2.7 degrees Celsius, and this has been pledged in the INDCs. So we will have an increase of 2.7 degrees Celsius by 2100 above the pre-industrial levels. So for this we require very high finance, currently more than $100 billion. I have already told you this is the base limit, $100 billion. We should have much more than that for green projects. Now if we want to maintain it to remain below the 2 degrees Celsius, currently temperature, global average temperature is 15 degrees Celsius. If we want it to remain not above the 17 degrees Celsius, we need to have emissions between 28 to 45 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent. For this we require enormous finance. Now this graph tells you the case. If the business as usual is continued, then we will have till 50 to 60 to 150 gigatons of CO2 release. If we see the pledges that the countries have made, we will approximate they have released till 55, 52, 50, it's like approximately near 50 gigatons. Then if we want to achieve 2 degree consistently, then the maximum emission intensity can be approximately 45 nearby. And below that, if we want below 1.5 degrees Celsius, then we will be having very low emission intensity. So more the carbon dioxide emission, more the temperature rise, as simple as that. So thank you everyone. Please like, comment and subscribe to www.idecipheris.com. Please like our Facebook page.